There it
And
is.
hey, and we
Woohoo!
are graced tonight with either M or J, but not MJ.
Pick a letter.
Here today, calling in from the great city of Pittsburgh, or at least the city of Pittsburgh, depending on your point of view.
And of course, we've gone live, and I am getting huge echoes.
Really, I am not getting any echoes. Are you getting echoes?
Not that I can detect.
Really, I'm getting like a 5-second delay.
Oh, that's horrible. Might be your sound settings maybe are picking up your mic maybe.
Back in a minute. You guys carry on though. I'll be right back.
No worries.
Hey, how you doing?
And we have our first guest. Tim is here.
Hey.
But Tim is everyone's favorite Canadian. So
Oh, that's. I mean, I have to admit, I got a long list of Canadians, man.
well, no one has watched more of our shows than Tim. So
he's the number one Canadian Bald&Balding fan.
yes,
There we go.
He is neither bald nor balding though,
Yeah, no, he's got the effusive beard.
which is kind of aggravating, but you know.
Oh, can't all be perfect, right?
Oh, so anyway, we were chatting before we came live, and you are not only an author, but you are also a developmental editor.
That is correct.
So which came first?
So I would have to say that it's probably the writing solely because I have been writing stories since I was in single digits in grade school. It's just sort of like it naturally like just emerges from me. But developmental editing, I would say, sort of also emerged just as something that I'm trying to think of a way to even put it, but like when I was in high school and shortly after I graduated, I did a lot of online writing website stuff. Like I used to belong to a very big critique group online, and so um, basically I got really good at critiquing stuff, and people started to offer to pay me to do that, and that is basically one of the things that I do. Um, but yeah, so basically that sort of thing is where that came from, was like just being able to like look at other people's stories and not necessarily diagnose what's wrong with them, because I think that's like kind of the wrong way to look at editing,
Yeah.
but just to look at like what a what 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 works really well for you, and also the moving parts that maybe like the author sometimes can't always see where the moving parts are and like how to stitch them together. And that's one of those things that I personally think that I'm fairly good at, in terms of like finding like overall theme and finding things that tie into the theme and threading them together. That's just sort of how that emerged, I would say. But I've been doing that off and on for probably about 15 years now.
So I know you said that you're in Pittsburgh, you're visiting relatives, but do you have copies of your book on hand?
I do.
There you go, coming prepared. Nice. So Bringer of the Scourge is book one, because when E.L. Montague comes on, he's going to, first thing he says is going to be, show us the book, and we're just going to tell him you're late. So
It'll be right here. It doesn't leave my side. It's all good.
we have a running gag here that EL gets banned by YouTube because he asks so many questions. They think he's a bot. So once he comes on, we'll take everyone put in your guess of what time you think he'll get banned. Then he comes in on his phone and continues to pepper us with questions. It's just one of the fun things that we get here on the show.
Listen, I mean, we can't all be Art Bell, you know. Like some of our call-ins are going to be a little bit more moderate.
So tell us about your book. Who is it about? Does everyone die at the end? No, or don't tell us that.
Well, I mean, so like, I mean, unfortunately, like, so like, this is one of those things where I didn't really think about this when I was writing this book. The end of this book, the way that I first drafted it is, let me see. I really wanted it to have an ending, and so it's very conclusive at the ending, except that it also left like just enough room for my brain to wake me up at 1 a.m. 2 months later and go, "There's another book in here. God damn it!" But so the long and the short of this one is Bringer of the Scourge is about a princess named Virulin due to lore. And Virulin is a kind of a like a Lady of Shalott kind of figure. She is locked in a tower because her father, the king, believes in a dread prophecy that she is going to be the ruiner of their kingdom. And the story opens with her escaping from that tower, and that's more or less the genesis of the story. um, so yeah, so it's an actiony, adventure-y. I hesitate to call it like sword and sorcery because it's not really in that same bailiwick, but it draws a lot on authors like Glenn Cook and Fritz Leiber in terms of just the kind of overall adventure vibe. And the origin of, I'm sorry, I was trying to think of a better way to put it. Like the um the story follows three main characters. So Virulin is one of the main characters. Her um tutor, mentor, instructor in swordsmanship, Carice Valor, is the second point of view character. And then our third point of view character is a fellow named Marin Tavat. And Marin Tavat is a cultist who is maybe not all that he seems when they first meet him. And that is more or less what happens there. They go on a grand adventure where the prophecy that has been hanging over Virulin all her life comes true and not so true in many interesting ways.
Okay. So John, back off on whatever it is you're taking tonight. I don't think we mentioned D20s at all.
Oh, that's actually a funny thought, because one of the things that I used specifically to build this book is a OSR RPG called Black Sword Hack. That was one of my touchstone elements for creating this book.
Yeah. Tim McKay knows all about doom prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
And then can't not bring this up. The wonderful Miss Laura Huey, Spiffbox 10 semifinalist.
Yes, Laura and I are very good friends.
So,
And I'm very flattered that my book is awaiting a read.
oh. So, when you are not editing other people's books or writing your own, what is it that you do with your time?
So I'm also an illustrator.
Of course.
I could have led with that, but I didn't.
Do you
Um,
illustrations too, or are you going to names?
so the first book doesn't have illustrations yet. Eventually there will be. That's kind of, I would say I would rather do that after I have the first 3 books out. I'm planning to kind of do like omnibus edition with illustrations as a
Nice.
like crowdfunding kind of thing, probably.
Yep.
But yeah, and I actually did illustrate the cover for the second book, which is The Shepherd in Shadow. That I would say, like, I didn't have an opportunity to really do a cover for the first one because the original cover manifested from the Inkfort Press self-publishing derby, and so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was the inspiration for the story, and I don't really feel like redoing that art just yet. So that's why it's stock art, but it's pretty old stock art, so I don't feel like it's not like AI or anything.
Right.
um
So that was the same competition Laura was in, and she got her.
yes, that's actually where Laura and I met. That's also where we met Tara Torre. So, or I think they knew each other. They might have known each other beforehand, but that was certainly where I met both of them. And so yeah, that was so this book was also a derby book, and then I did enter at Spiffbo, and I was also a semifinalist under the Queen's Book Asylum banners. Um, so I had a very noble defeat to Wolf of Wintervale. I'm sure that that one is going to go far in Spiffbo.
I am so sorry. I did not know that. I would have definitely led with that.
Oh no, it's all right. I kind of like I've been very minimal about it because I I'm trying to think of a way to put it. Like, um, I just, I just, uh, it's just a thing that I entered kind of randomly. And I wasn't sure if because of the way they did the lottery, like I wasn't even sure I was going to get in. So even getting in was like kind of exciting.
Yep. So
Um,
I was in last year, and I was quickly out. So
I don't think anyone was quickly out this year. They really dragged ass, like a lot of the groups did. Not blaming anybody. There were a lot of books this year, and a lot of the books were very good, and decisions were very hard to make.
yep.
Like I can't begrudge anyone who are taking a long time to read their books. But yeah, I don't think anybody was quick this year.
So I'm in the Spacebow one now this year,
Oh, nice.
and thank goodness I'm not in that group. The one woman, she posted her review of the 10 books that she read for her group, and she said,
No.
so there's 4 ratings I'll give them: hard pass, soft yes, and definite yes. And the first 8 were hard passes. And I'm like,
Ooh,
wow.
that is a stiff ballot.
Then she had a soft pass, and then she had 1 hard yes. And I'm like, wow, 1 out of 9. I'm like, whoo, glad you're not in judging my group.
Yeah, I mean,
Did she say what she didn't like about them?
She did, for each of them, she gave you the little, what it was about, and then she would go on about what she did not like. But I just kind of skimmed that because, at this point, I'm like,
80% is kind of
hard, yeah. So,
yeah.
yeah, it,
I'm not going to be saying much because I'll tell you what I'm working with. I have a 9-second delay. So when either of you say
Yikes.
anything, 9 seconds later, which is a long time, it
yes.
starts again. Right? So it's
Oh,
not
that's
just like a
terrible.
little, it's not like a cavern echo. It's like a weird kind of on purpose echo that's just far enough away to be super distracting. Sorry.
It's okay.
And I have
It
no idea
happens.
what you've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. So.
It's okay. It was mostly Spiffo.
It's okay.
Are those unicorns behind you, or are they like?
Do you want to know what they are? Those are vintage My Little Ponies.
Okay, all right.
That's another one of those. So I'm an illustrator and I do random craft things. One of the random craft things that I do is restoration of what they call Gen 1 My Little Ponies.
How do you
So
restore a My Little Pony?
that's a great question. So they get really dirty because they're child toys, of course. So and of course at this point most of them have been in someone's basement for like 20 years, even if it's someone who was like collecting them as a child. So they are often really, really dirty and sometimes have various structural problems or even just like need to have new hair put in because someone gave them a really nasty haircut. And
So
that's.
when you do that, sorry,
Mhm.
we're going down a weird
Oh, it's
rabbit
fine. I
hole
love
here.
rabbit holes.
When you're perfect for this show. When you do that, how does that impact any value that the toy might have?
So that's a great question. And the short answer is it depends because some of them are very rare and some of them are not very rare. And if it's very rare and you do customizations or restorations to it, that is usually bad. But there's a lot of them that are like a $5 or less on the collector market item. So
Yeah.
those ones are very easy to customize, very like no one's going to argue with you about like collector value because they were a mass market produced toy
Right.
and they're very popular in a like in terms of like there was like a decade of production and the earlier ones are a little bit more available and the later ones they made smaller runs of them, so those ones tend to be a little bit rarer and then there are a couple that were only available via mail order and those are the ones that get to be like those are the ones that you see like outlandish eBay listings for.
Okay. So are
And
you like a certified My Little Pony restorer?
I'm not certified, but I spent 10 years in the like art restoration trenches, so that's
Okay.
that's where my qualifications come from there.
The reason all of that came up, and I'm just hearing your last response starting again now, is my daughter used to have American Girl dolls.
Oh, yes, there's a big market for those too. I run into a
And
lot of people that collect those.
if anybody's watching this and knows anything about American Girl dolls, anyway, her brother, when they were younger, decided it would be good fun to see if American Girl dolls work like a Stretch Armstrong. And
Ooh.
spoiler, they do not.
Ooh.
Um, but when you get them fixed through the
Mhm.
American Girl doll store,
Yep.
they retain all their value, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And
if they have the
it
official but that's
they
because they have a whole system for that.
right, and
So,
it's
like
marketing genius.
it's so smart.
Oh
When I
my
was a
god,
kid, they called it the doll hospital,
a doll
and they used to
hospital,
give
right?
them a little like, they used to give them a
You
little
send it
little
away, and
hospital gown
it
and
comes back in a box with a little gown, and it
the
has the
little
little
bracelet.
bracelet thing and a balloon and the whole bit. It's crazy,
Yeah.
and that's why when you walk into one of those stores, you're leaving your check behind.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Anyway,
But you know
sorry.
what? They are very collectible, and they have, for the most part, especially if they're older, they have retained a lot of value in terms of like a child's toy that people actually play with. It's kind of remarkable, actually.
So if
Probably because
anybody's
they were such
looking
high
for an
quality.
American Girl doll, give me a call.
So, usually I am the one who brings us back to your book, but
Yep.
but I'm going on another rabbit hole from this rabbit hole.
Sure.
What did you do in art restoration for 10 years?
All right. So the longer story there is that I was uh, a technician for a sculpture supply company, and so my job was to know how to Google things really, really well, and also to give the information that I learned during that to various clients. Um, in terms of what we would do, like there was not really like a single day that I was doing exactly the same thing, but a lot of the work that I did would be, for example, in New York City, there would be people doing restoration for like stone sculptures and that kind of thing, where you have to have archival materials to do the repairs to like a display piece of artwork, that kind of thing. And in addition to that, I also sort of needed to know how they were made in order to be able to give that kind of information. And so it's a job that I sort of fell into ass backwards by being really good at just sort of distilling questions from people, like what are you trying to accomplish and how are you trying to accomplish it, and so I would deal with anything from like stone, bronze, and other metals, like metal casting and stuff like that. We also did mold making and casting advice and um, consultation for pretty much every mold making and casting material there is. So we would have like silicone and polyurethanes for all manner of mold making and casting stuff, but including functions for things like television and film and like special effects stuff, like all of those kind of things were kind of like in my bailiwick. And restoration just sort of came in from that. And I'm
What's the
trying to think
coolest thing
of,
you've ever restored?
oh, I there's a couple of things that are on NDA there. Honestly, I actually really would say probably I've worked on a couple of really old Barbies before, and those were actually really fun.
Now, did you say there were NDAs involved?
I have done some work that I can't disclose, basically.
Now, without getting into what it
Uh huh.
is that because that it's something that people don't want to know it's been restored, or they just don't want people to know that they have it, or
A little bit of both, I would say. Like some of the stuff that I've done is also just like stuff of a sensitive nature. So like sculptures that belong in a private collection, that kind of thing.
so you've never done any like work for like Weta or something like that?
I have not. No, and that would that wouldn't be an NDA. I'd be like, yeah, I worked for what a.
Right, right.
We did actually we did actually have several clients who were at Weta at some point in time. So this is not actually very far
Well, there's
fetched at
only a
all.
dozen of us here. Come on, go ahead, tell us. We won't
I
say
mean,
nothing.
I mean, honestly, so like one of the things that I also did was a lot of silicone work, and so um, with that there is sort of like trying to think of a way to put it. Like there's a lot of silicone sex work stuff, and so that kind of thing is something that I've done repairs, restoration, or other custom work for. And I leave the rest to your imagination.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways we could go there, but we probably just won't.
We
You
gotta
ever
wait
get
for
an
the
order
after
like
dark
that
for
and
that one.
recognize? Do you ever get an order like that and recognize the name on it as like somebody like quasi famous or actually famous?
When I was working at that company, we had a lot of famous clients and stuff, and we also had a retail sales storefront. So we would have like artists and people walking in to actually like buy materials to do work too. Like also like even just like clay and tools and armature materials and stuff like that. Like we had people walking in and buying stuff all the time. My favorite story for that one, and this is going to be an even bigger rabbit hole, but one time I was working like middle of the afternoon, just about thinking about getting ready to go for lunch, and this guy walks in and he's really tall. He's this really like wonderful mane of like white gray hair, and he like just looks and sounds so much like Ted Danson. And I'm standing there and I'm trying to explain to him like he wanted to know about how to sculpt a figure in clay. And he wanted like a really thorough rundown of how to do it, what the materials were, what my favorite materials were, like all of this stuff. And I'm just walking him through it, and the whole time I'm thinking like, God, he just sounds so much like Ted Danson. I wonder if anybody ever tells him that. It was Ted Danson.
Yeah.
I
But he had long hair.
No, like this like shaggy kind of like this would have been right around the time that he was filming Bored to Death for HBO. And he had kind of like the like swoop like pompadour kind of thing going. So it was a little shaggy looking, but it was like he looked very well put together. And I'm very as a longtime New Yorker, you kind of just get to a point where you don't acknowledge that someone is famous, and so like
You don't want to be that person. It's like,
you don't want to be
cool.
that person. And
Okay.
I'm also just face blind enough that like if someone looks like someone to me, it's like it could just be some guy. Like
Yeah.
there's no guarantee that it's
So
not.
I'm going to try to pull us out of the rabbit hole, but I'm going to do it really slowly. Okay. So you mentioned a movie with Ted Danson that I've never heard of,
Mhm.
and it reminded me of a movie that I was watching last night that I wish I never heard of.
Oh.
And it's based on a book. It came out a few years ago, I think, or just recently. I forget what. It's called Uglies.
Oh, I've the
Have you
name
seen it?
strikes me familiar, but I haven't seen it.
Mike, have you seen it?
No, I'm tracing this rabbit hole and seeing how we're going to get back.
It is going to get
You
back.
got to make a map.
Trust me.
You got to make a map.
We got it. Anyway, the movie's blurb, and blurbs are something we deal with here.
Mhm.
So it's coming back. The movie's blurb said it's a cross between Divergent and the movie where all the kids are killing each other.
Oh gosh.
The
I hate that there's like that's like
the
a genre.
dystopian one with the chick with the bow.
You're talking Hunger Games.
Hunger Games. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So Divergent and Hunger Games were like Divergent Hunger Games.
Okay, but so like Divergent was like a ripoff of Hunger Games. Like what the heck?
Right. So this is from a book, right?
Okay.
And when we're watching the movie, and sometimes, Mike, I've talked about the horrible Christmas movies my daughter and I watch.
Yes.
This was one of those, but in sci-fi / fantasy / dystopian format. And it was absolutely one of the worst things I've ever seen. Right? And it made me think that, because every now and then you get to a point when you're writing and you go like, what the hell am I doing here? Who am I kidding with this, right? But then it's like, no, somebody wrote that book, and they probably got a contract for it. They probably had an agent, right? And then it got made into a freaking movie, and it's awful. I mean, it's objectively foul. You need to watch it, right? So
interesting.
So
what a pitch.
My question is, now that you said this is a terrible, terrible work, are you going to ask her more about her book? Because that's really not the way to get back to.
Well, no, we're back on the books now.
We're on the books. We're good. I was gonna say, what about maps?
Maps are awesome.
Because I made my own map.
Nice.
See, that could be something else you do if you're an illustrator and you start making maps. People pay very good money for a good map.
They do. I don't love making maps. I did it out of necessity because this book is an adventure book and it does travel along a lot of different places, and so having the map is very useful. Unfortunately, it was very useful for me specifically getting through it. Um, but yeah, so I'll say it's one of those things I'm open to, but I haven't done anybody else's maps just yet.
My work in progress. I went and not Incarnate, but there's another one called Wonder Draft, I think.
Yeah,
And so I made this,
nice.
right? But you can see that I used it for notes and all that kind of nonsense. And I finally got sick of looking at all my notes, and I've hired someone to recreate that for me
Very
and
cool.
do whatever they want to do with it. But yeah, maps are awesome. And
Yes.
Mike uses his maps as it's a cross between map and Mike as wrapping paper when he goes to
Ooh,
shows. And
that's fancy.
well,
I like it.
I usually have a wax seal. I've not put the wax seal on this yet, but yeah.
give her
That
the
is
bottom line of it though, Mike.
So I started doing this year. Last year I sold 3 paperbacks for every 1 hardback. Now I'm at nearly 1-to-1.
nice.
I make much more
Very
money.
nice.
So
Yeah, my trying to think, I really haven't pushed. I do technically have a hardcover, but I have not really pushed it because I feel like for the amount that it costs Amazon to make one, it's much easier for me to just pitch people on the paperback and wait until there's a series ready that I can either say like here's all of them in hardback or here's the omnibus. Like that's sort of what I'm aiming for anyways.
So, Jay, did you talk about your book in the first 10 minutes that I wasn't
I
here?
did. I told Mike everything. It's too late.
All right. Well, shit. Yeah.
so I have a question for you.
I was just messing with
So your
Yeah.
character Virulin, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. The cool thing with that name is really like I don't mind if people pronounce it differently because there are at least 3 languages mentioned in the story, and everybody probably has a different pronunciation.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to set up a very well-known scenario for Virulin, and you're going to tell me what she does.
Sounds good.
So no, we're not rolling dice today. This is something new I thought up on the drive.
Hold on, Mike. How do you spell the name?
It's VIERRELYNE.
Okay.
So Virulin has separated from her party. She's under the mountains, and the orcs are hunting her. And she goes to this underground lake, and she finds a golden ring. And then Gollum appears and asks her, does she have his precious? What happens next?
Oh, all right. So it's very funny that you went with this specific direction because,
on your own?
well, no. So Virulin actually has a magical weapon of her own, and it has some. I hesitate to say like similar properties to the ring, but I will say that it leaves her in a position where she's very fearless of most things. So I would say she probably would get very busy with her broadsword.
Okay.
So
Wow.
she would just kill Gollum right up.
Oh, I think absolutely. She is a stab first, ask questions later type.
Well, that's going to suck when the Eagles bring her to Mount Doom and she can't do anything because Gollum's not there to stop her. And she takes over the world and becomes the ultimate bad guy.
So that's really where the rest of her party comes in. So Marion needs to catch up to her.
So does she behead Gollum? Is she one who'll go for like the beheading shot, or does she just stab?
Oh, I think she probably would behead him. Probably.
Okay.
Not
the very heroic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Especially
This got dark enough.
especially under the influence of the demon that lives in her crown.
Oh, what's that now?
Yes, the crown on the cover here.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone who lives in there, and he's very opinionated and offers her a lot of power in exchange for a lot of worldly autonomy.
So
And that's one of her
this hat
battles.
off.
So,
She does not take her crown off very often, and certainly not in situations where it might be advantageous to have a demon whispering in her ear.
Yeah,
so
sure.
does the demon have a name? And please tell me it's Ro.
The demon does have a name. The name is Margandrus,
Oh,
and so
where do I name that?
yeah, I feel like it's a long name, but it's a good name. And yeah, so Margandrus is often offering her aid, shall we say, in defeating her enemies, and she takes him up on it a non-zero number of times.
Does he provide her long life?
I can't really say anything about that just yet because this is only the first book of a trilogy.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
So, would you call your work? Is it fantasy? Is it grimdark? I'm guessing it's not cozy.
um, I would call this heroic fantasy.
Okay.
Thinking of like my influences for this, I would say, are like C.L. Moore, Michael Moorcock, Fritz Leiber, Glenn Cook. Like this is very much like a love letter to those authors.
Oh, Tim, I like it. Margandrus is been a. I wouldn't get nearly as many "Good Day, Ma'am" emails as I get if I had a name like Margandrus.
I mean, I feel like it would set a certain precedent for sure.
It would set expectations. I know that
Yeah,
much.
it would definitely. I mean,
Just
like I feel like it would change your interactions a lot for sure.
well, certainly at Starbucks, right? They'd look at the cup and they'd go, "Bob," you know.
Yeah, my
Like
names are definitely not Starbucks barista compatible for sure.
But I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the goal.
I personally prefer it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of my, and I would say that might be mostly Michael Moorcock influence there. I love having like just totally inscrutable names.
It either has to be something like that, or Sam Gamgee, right? I mean, just
Yeah,
like.
see, I I definitely I like names that will shorten to names that people kind of recognize. Like Virulin is called by most of her friends and comrades Vi, and I like that a lot. It's actually a short name that's very meaningful to me, like in my family. So that was sort of like just sort of a nice little thing that sort of emerged as I was writing. But yeah, like in terms of fantasy names, I generally do lean to not Earth-like because I am writing stories that definitely do not take place on Earth, even in an alternate Earth kind of way.
When do you? People have talked about this before, right? Okay, so if you're not on Earth and blah blah blah, I
Secondary
mean,
world fantasy.
there are still things that you need to talk about that people understand, right?
Yes.
Like there are still minutes and
Yeah. I
time and things
use
like that. It's like you're not going to make up a whole system of time.
Oh, I
rules.
don't
I mean,
do
that's
that.
just
No.
yeah.
No. My immersion kind of is at like names and influences and things like that. Like if there's like a religion or something like that, I want to riff on those kind of things in ways that make them unique and different. But a horse is a horse. I don't really like to do what is called in the Turkey City lexicon of critiquing what is called call a rabbit a smearp, which is that
Yeah.
like a thing is in all ways a rabbit, but it's called a smearp because it's science fiction. And that is a thing that annoys the crap out of me. So I don't do that. I overwhelmingly prefer not
Don't
to.
read my first series
It's okay.
because I did exactly that, and I wish to God I hadn't done it.
You know what the
It's like I
magic
don't
of
want to
editing
just
is
call them
though?
elves and dwarfs. I want to call them something else.
Well, so here's the thing though with elves and dwarves, I actually think that like as far as that kind of thing goes, I don't really think that having names for those types of things is a problem because that's you're naming a culture. You're not really naming like
Okay,
a
great. Well, read the
creature.
books then. That's
Yeah, see?
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. It's more
You
like
have
if you're
permission.
trying to have people like smear hunting and it's like it's a rabbit. Like, just say
So,
rabbit. The reader needs to be immersed in the story in so many other ways that trying to invent a new thing for a thing that already exists is just sort of like
Right.
unless there's a reason to do that, it's not my preference.
So I have a couple silly questions that I've selected. Instead of rolling, I just select them now.
Sounds
Um,
good.
so, number one, do you have a preferred method for slaying dragons?
Um, I mean, I'm a let live kind of dragon person, but if you have to do it, I would say it could be worse than in Laura Huey's own Sunset Sovereign, where you have tea first.
And next thing is there a piece of writing advice that you've heard that you just completely ignore?
One.
Well,
Excellent.
let's start there.
um, I believe very firmly in starting stories in the manner and style in which you continue. So I generally don't like to do a lot of prologue kind of work. I kind of feel like someone who's going to enjoy my story is not really the kind of person like I'm not going to do a lot of front loading of like, well, 1,000 years ago there was a prophecy that a princess did this and this and this. I just it doesn't matter to me. I'd rather start with the exciting part. um, which is kind of out of vogue right now. So I'm open to the idea that my book is difficult for some people accordingly.
Prologues are one of those weird things that people pick a camp on those. And I think it depends on the prologue, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes they work really well, and sometimes they needed to, exposit a bit. And
Exactly. And I feel like it's not one of those it's I am definitely not a person who's going to ever write something with a prologue because it's just not how I write.
yeah,
But I don't have a problem with them when they materially inform the way you read the story. Like that's one of those things that I think of as a high level editing choice. And so it's tough if you're not working with an editor on whether or not you should have a prologue. In my opinion, uh, like there are absolutely people that I've worked with where like a prologue was necessary because they do have setup work that they need to do. Um, I do feel like if you are going to do setup work in a prologue, it needs to be really impactful. It can't just be like I'm spinning my wheels and I don't know where to start the story, so I'm going to start with a prologue. You have to have a reason to have a prologue, in my opinion. And that's maybe a little more nuanced than no prologue, but I'm going to say there are many, many opportunities where you could just say chapter one.
yeah.
Yeah. I
If
always say prologues have to be short if they're going to be effective. If you're going to give me a 40-page prologue, I'm not
that's
going to.
chapter one, it's just chapter one. It's a significant piece of the book. And that's the thing that like that's the difference between a prologue and a chapter one for me is like, is this just flavor that I need to absorb so that I understand what I'm walking into? Or is this really just events that happened a lot earlier and should be just chapter one in a story that happens to have a very long timeline? And that's sort of my
I will admit again that my current work has a prologue, but it didn't until I was probably 8 or 10 chapters in, and then I kind of went, yeah, I need something to
see
explain
that's
some
where
of
the
this.
that's where coming in and like you can self-edit. Self-editing is very effective. And if you self-edit when you're looking at your book and going like, I need setup material for the rest of this book to be readily absorbed by my reader.
Yeah.
Like that's perfectly acceptable. And that's actually a very good use of prologue usually.
So, bouncing off Mike's question of advice you've got that you ignore, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten that you've actually taken to heart?
I would say that is another one of those things that is also very difficult. I think narrowing it down to one specific piece of advice, I would say that every word has to carry its own water, and what it doesn't carry, it drags. This was advice that was given to me at Viable Paradise by the late, great Dr. Deborah Doyle. And it is something that I carry around with me quite a lot as far as writing advice goes. Essentially, especially when you're working in any kind of speculative fiction where you're asking your reader to do a lot of work in their mind,
Mhm.
when you're working very hard to make a world for them, every word you use has to be super efficient. And it's hard to kind of balance like efficiency with other aesthetic concerns sometimes. So it's best to just use the words that you need to use to get the story out, and then fish out the ones that don't carry enough water.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's not it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just sort of like one of my first personal rules for self-editing.
So if you're going to get a manuscript from somebody,
Hmm.
do you want to see it after the first draft, the vomit draft, or do you want them to go through it again and take out all the stuff that makes no sense?
Oh, that depends. It really depends on the size and scale of the work, because the longer it is, the harder it is to fix big structural problems if they linger long. Like
Yep.
the longer that you spend on a manuscript and the longer the manuscript is, the more entrenched a potential problem could be. And that could be as simple as like, I built this whole story around going to this one city, but it doesn't actually make any sense for them to go to this city. So what do I do? And being able to being able to fish out that kind of stuff fairly early on is pretty good. I would say I like to see probably like first full draft after you've done all the like typo like round one cleanup. You've made sure to like ideally like name all your characters, name all your locations, eliminate all the little brackets that are like fix this later.
Oh, I'm not the only one that does that. Good.
Oh, I do that constantly.
I have yellow highlights all through my document where I need a name or something like that. It's like,
I
oh, okay.
I learned to do mine in brackets rather than highlights, because highlight didn't always work well on my computer for some reason. So I learned to always use brackets, and then I search my document for brackets before I hand it off to anybody. And like find and replace on the brackets, it usually is like, oh, okay, yeah, that was a whole chapter I just said fuck it to. All right, great.
So I have a horror story for you. I want your reaction. So
Yes.
first book, sent it to a developmental editor.
Hmm.
She went through the whole thing, and this and that, and she's like, I did Google searches. You clearly just made this word up because it doesn't show up anywhere on Google. And went through the whole thing. And then when she's done, I was like, oh, I have my Bible that has everyone's name and every location spelled and why it's important. Should I have sent that to you?
I mean, I would say that like everyone approaches a manuscript differently. So I don't know that I necessarily need your whole glossary beforehand or anything like that. Like I'm one of those readers who's very like, I hesitate to say like I have faith in you, but just in general, like I do have faith in you. I will figure out what the word means if it's not a real word. But I'm usually in the structural guts part of the story as far as dev edit goes. Like I'm the person that you call in when you're like, I just don't know what the plot of this is.
Yeah, hopefully that context brings out what your word is supposed to mean.
And and if it's not doing that, like I might flag if someone has something and I'm just like, I don't know what this means, I will flag, I do not understand what this means.
And the editor, bless her, she's like, you called this place, you spelled it this way, 6 times, and that way 4 times.
Uh
I'm like, well, the 6 were in the beginning of the book, and the 4 were, a month later when I had to remember it, and I didn't know how I spelled it, so I made a new way up. That's why that's that way.
So
oh, that's I don't even mess with that stuff. As far as spelling and grammar and stuff, I can't keep track of that.
the first time you write a word and you realize this is the way I'm going to spell this, you
Hmm.
highlight the word, you right click, and you add it to your dictionary.
Oh, that's very
So that,
smart.
so that when you spell it wrong the next time, it shows up with a little red line under it.
Well, I do that now. When I first started writing,
one
I
of
was
your
like,
other editors told you to do that because they said, "What the hell? Pick away."
when I first started, I was like, but if I add this as a word and then I have to type, serious stuff, I'll get all these misspellings because, Grammy will come up oh so often in my regular life. So, yeah, the stupid things you do when you just start writing.
As far as that goes, that's a pretty minor faux pas.
Until it makes
I
it
wouldn't
into
be that
print,
bothered.
Jay, I'm really sorry, but I have a 7:45 break I've got to go to.
No worries.
Folks in the chat, thank you very much for joining us. Sorry, it's been like I've been talking to 6 people here because I'm hearing all this at such a weird
It's all
night.
good.
But thank you very much for joining us. It's been a wonderful conversation. Hope we can get you back on again when I only have you I'm listening to, as opposed to you and you.
Rude.
And Mike, take it home, man.
Okay. See you, Rob.
Cheers, everybody.
So now, who has an embarrassing Rose story? So, yeah, I would just tell you my first book. My main character is Grami, and I spelled it Graeme because why would you have all those silent letters? So clearly it has to be Grami. My editor's like, by the way, that's Graham. I'm like, why is that Graham? Why are there 2 E's in there that don't need to be?
It's true. That is actually a pronunciation.
So then I changed it. I was like, you know what? Fine. It's Grahme, Grahme. And I was like, can't get this wrong. My main character, I cannot spell his name wrong. So I changed everywhere in the document. I did not change the back cover. The very first word is the misspelled character's name, Grami, which is Graham, on my cover on the back of my book. I
hate it when that happens.
64 of those books. So if you have one of those,
they're very rare first edition, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing, and fortunately, I fixed it eventually.
Yeah, it's funny because like as far as those kind of errors go, like I also make those all the time. I'm not a copy editor by trade. So that part of editing is that's other people. One of the things that when I was at Viable Paradise, James McDowell was one of my instructors, and one of the things he said to me was like, "Oh no, they pay people to do that part for you, or you pay other people to do that part for you. The important part you have to do is write the story."
So Ro is actually my line editor, so he catches most of that stuff now.
Aha! Oh, so that's why he's testy about it though too. Like that makes sense. Suddenly it's very clear why he's like, no, really, you need to do it this way.
But I like best about Ro is that I've had people like, perhaps you should consider maybe looking at this, which is mine of delete, but Ro's like, you idiot, you screwed this up, and I'm like, now I know there's a problem. I'll look for it. But if it's the whole couched in the let me be so kind and wonderful and tell you that perhaps maybe there might be, and I'm like,
no, that's not how I approach stories.
There's
a certain amount of like those are what we call, or at least what I call, hesitation marks.
Yeah.
And I use them verbally because that's what they're for. But if you are writing like that on paper, that's usually a sign that you're not confident in what you're telling somebody.
Yep.
So, that's hard. You have to build that confidence over time and work.
Yep. So the secondary world that your book is set in, we're going to talk about your book, I swear.
Oh, it's fine.
So you said it's a secondary Earth. What is the setup like politically? Are there multiple kingdoms fighting? Is there just one emperor?
So that's a great question. And the short answer is it starts as a single kingdom that is got sort of like fractured principalities.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the inciting incident of the novel, at least the first novel, is an alliance of 3 of the external principalities are all converging together to take the castle at Talor, which is the governing castle of Darabor.
Okay, well, I'm glad you said that then, because I have another question for you from my silly question list.
No worries.
Another scenario for you.
Oh boy.
Virlin.
Yes.
Unto the king, the emperor, whoever. She's in the throne room. She's giving the king some report. The king gets very angry, violently upset, gets up, red in the face, screaming as loud as he can. His voice is, fraying. He turns red-faced. He has a stroke and he dies.
Mm-hmm.
Down the stairs, right at her feet. What does she do next?
Oh, I mean, nothing. That's her dream come true, actually.
I mean, is she afraid for her life that the guards are going to run her through, or is she going to take the crown and say, "I'm in charge"? What does she do?
Oh, all right. I mean, do you want me to give you spoilers on the first chapter? Because I'm happy to do it.
If it's the first chapter, go ahead.
Yes. So chapter 1 of my book is actually um Virilyn and her mentor and this strange young fellow who has materialized in her castle and has brought her a pile of armor and has opened the door so that she can escape. So she's a princess and her father is the emperor of Darabor at the beginning of the story. It does not take long for there to be no emperor of Darabor, and that is I hesitate to say that it's like a focal point of the story because it's kind of not. It's a very much a story that follows the three main characters where they go rather than the fall of this particular empire.
Right.
Which is maybe a little bit of an oversight on my part, but in my defense, I wanted to get through the book relatively quickly, and I didn't really feel like it needed to be a Chihuahua killer. So I didn't spend a lot of time on that part because it's not very interesting to me. However, the fall of the what's that?
Chihuahua killer?
Yeah, yeah, you're like a Sanderson, like, you know,
I've never heard of that, but
14 pounds of paper kind of book.
from the people in here, because my rule is I will not read a book that's more than 500 pages, because if it's more than 500 pages, it needs a good editor to fix that.
I generally kind of feel the same way. I am not a fan of super thick books, and in fact, like, just to give you, this is 279 pages, and that's including my about the author tag.
Oh wow, bless you
And
for
this
that.
this is a mass market paperback size, like, just to give you the
Yep.
like.
Oh, nice.
So it's a nice, like, one of the things I like about being my own publisher is I can decide what the like form factor is, and vintage mass market paperback was my preferred size of reading for pretty much everything. So that's part of the objective there.
Yeah, me too, but that was more because I couldn't afford the large. I was like, who wants these large size? Give me the cheap book. You know, it's the same story.
Right. I mean, and to be fair, like, nowadays that's not actually it's not actually like materially cheaper to print a mass market versus any other type of paperback because of the way that the machinery works now. But back in the day, it used to be a different thing. But yeah, so in any case, the relatively short fantasy book there, in this story, like, this story is technically complete. It technically has an ending, and I wouldn't fault anybody who didn't feel like they needed to read the next one. But the next one follows pretty much directly what happens at the end of this one, and leaves the door open for the third one, which is also dealing with the aftermath of the first book, but from a different perspective.
Okay, well, we have Dave Lawson here, who is great at marketing, but I will give you a little advice. And you don't ever say, "I'm fine if you stop after book one." You never ever say that.
That's fair. That's fair. I appreciate that. I guess the thing that I'm like it is technically complete there, but there's a really big nagging question that I did leave.
Yeah, you always, if you like book one, book two has more of the same and better.
I think that maybe that's part of my problem with my pitch is that the second book is definitely, it's more of the same in that it follows two of the main characters through a very emotional landscape. But
Dave, the secret to marketing is to keep doing it till you're successful. So if you like it, you'll do it.
I think Dave is a great marketer, actually. I have purchased more than one book from a glowing recommendation from Dave. So,
but does he market his own book well? That's the
I
question.
think so. I think he does a good job.
I have not got to that yet, but I am going to read that probably next year. But Dave, I'm going to read it, and as always, I'm really good at buying books. I may not ever read it, but I bought it. Damn it!
See, the thing I view with book buying is that you're buying basically the entertainment equivalent of a wine cellar. You don't necessarily need to read every single book as soon as you buy it. You need to have a wide selection of books you can choose from, so that when you have a need for a book, you have a book that fits that need.
Nice. I like that. So, are you ever going to write other types of stories? Or are you heroic fantasy? Or is there a cozy coming in your
God,
future?
I wish. I'm not really a cozy writer. This is one of those things that's just sort of like, it's one of the things I dearly wish I was able to do, and I am extremely not. um, I hesitate to call myself a grimdark author because I don't really I don't think of what I do as necessarily grimdark. Like the most grimdark of my influences is probably Glenn Cook, and if you like his Black Company books or his Dread Empire books, you'll probably like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the a lot of the things that people say about my books are things that are generally true of his books, and so that's one of the little things I cleave to because he's very influential for me,
Yeah.
style wise and structure wise. I would say I like to do a lot of things that I think of as things that I learned how to do in Glenn Cook books. Um, but yeah, so I would say that most of my style kind of falls in the like heroic fantasy, classic fantasy, old school Renaissance is a thing that I've kind of tried to call it because I feel like, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Black Sword Hack was actually a pretty big influence on how I wrote this one
Mhm.
because I had to write a book in 3 months and market it. So I did use the solo module method for playing Black Sword Hack to kind of build some of the early action of the story and set pieces, and that sort of I feel like that is well enough camouflaged that it's not immediately apparent on the page, but it's one of those little things I like to tell people about because sometimes it makes them very excited about it.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say like the other side of my influence file is probably very sword and sorcery. Like Fritz Leiber in particular, I've probably said his name like too many times already today, but Fritz is also very influential on me. Bofford and Grey Mouser is like one of my favorite things on earth. So um just in terms of storytelling and like character camaraderie, like being able to write some characters that are just like that vivid and interesting is one of those things that I aspire to.
Yep. Oh, okay. So, have you seen our show before?
I have, but I would have to say that I probably need to be reminded of if there's a special feature I'm supposed to be remembering how to do.
There's a special feature. Have you seen the Bald Dome?
No, that I don't think that I
We
have.
don't do it every show, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to roll a bunch of dice,
Oh,
and then I will give you a location. I will give you a magic potion that you don't know what it does. And then I will give you a choice of a common item or a weapon. If you choose the common item, you will face a common animal and an interaction of your choosing. You will tell us how the story goes. Or if you choose a weapon, then you will face a fantasy creature. And we used to say, like, battle, like to the death. And then people are like, but my character doesn't do that. So now
now my question is: am I using a character that already exists, or am I using a character I'm inventing on the fly?
you are using one of your characters from your book, and the rules of your world still hold sway here.
Ah,
This is
I
a
like
tiny
it.
little corner that you didn't know existed in your world that they're going to be teleported to.
Oh, this. If you ever did get a chance to read my book, you would understand why that's very, very cool.
Okay, and what is your favorite color?
I'm gonna go with like lime green.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. Um, we asked that because for the longest time we do this, and everybody's like, I have a potion, I don't know what it does, I'm not using it. So now we start saying, you have
It's
a lime green fizzy potion that you don't know what it does, but it is 100% effective whether you have your character drink it or whether you have it throw it at the encounter creature. It's 100% will work, whatever it does.
interesting.
So let me get my dice set up here. So your character has been sent to an underground cavern illuminated by glowing crystals.
Hmm.
Okay, and she has a lime green fizzy potion. This is Virlin. I kind of just assumed that, but
It's funny because this would play out very differently with between like either of my two main characters. I'm trying to think because like so. So there's one character that would where the circumstance of being teleported somewhere would be very normal and expected. and then there's Marilyn who would be surprised by it, but has been through that before.
okay. So who are we choosing as your character?
I think I'll go with Vi. I think I'll go with Vi here.
So it is Vi. So she has her lime green fizzy potion. And now it's time for you to choose, does she want a common item or does she want a weapon? And it'll affect what she has to face.
Vi always wants a weapon.
Okay, so the common item would have been a chisel, but now he gets a weapon, and that is a dagger, which in my mind is not a whole lot different from a chisel.
It's very similar, yeah. There's a lot of similarities there.
So instead of facing a hippopotamus in this underground crystal cavern, don't ask me how it got there. Instead, she will face a monstrous cyclops, who I guess has to stoop over because, cave. But
sure.
Anyway, she's transported.
There's high ceiling caves. It's a thing.
Place. She has her dagger in one hand. She has the lime green fizzy potion in the other. She turns a corner, and lo and behold, there's Cyclops with his club. What happens next?
So I would say with her, she would be looking for the advantage very quickly. And if it is a Cyclops, I think she would probably want to find a way to limit his vision even further. So I feel like maybe throwing the fizzy potion at the Cyclops' head might be her first move.
So there's no parlay or anything like that. It's straight warrior.
I mean, it depends. So like the thing is that she doesn't have a lot of tools in her toolbox when it comes to diplomacy. She has very limited skills there, and so I would say that if someone appears to be threatening to her, she's going to appear to be threatening to them right back.
Okay.
But that's a very fair point. It's a very fair point. If he were to approach her and just want to talk, I feel like she would still be like very reluctant. But
okay, so she turns a corner and she sees the side of the Cyclops. It's like a T-junction, and he's just walking down, and she turns there and she sees him as he goes past. And then he realizes it's a dead end, so he turns around, comes back, and now they're going to meet. What does she do?
So if we're looking at the cautious approach, then she might not jump right into battle. But if there's any sign that he's coming for her, she's coming right back at him.
Well, I mean, it's your story, so you tell us how this plays out.
Oh well, I'm trying to picture. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Said I will throw ideas out if you need them, but this is your.
I would actually not mind, if only because I am lacking some context. So
the Cyclops in traditional fashion is kind of a brute. Caesar grunts at her, points his club at her in an unfriendly way, because I've never heard of a Cyclops doing anything friendly. So
yeah, see, this is where I'm saying she would probably be looking for the advantage.
Potion.
Oh, I see. I feel like so if the potion does, but the thing is like if the potion does whatever she wants.
No, it does something, but she doesn't know what it does.
Ah, okay. So as far as that goes, I don't. Yeah, she would be looking for a way to incapacitate him.
Yeah, she only has a dagger, so yeah.
Yes. Yeah, not having her sword would be a big issue for her. She's very dependent on that. I beg your pardon?
Does she have her crown with her?
Well, see, this is the thing. Now, see, if she had the crown with her, she would absolutely have the ability to summon her armor, and depending on the circumstances, also her sword. So,
I mean,
that hardly seems fair if I'm being limited to having a dagger.
No. This is just what you came to. She was sleeping. She just had a dagger by her side when she got transported. Now she's here, and she has a Cyclops who's looking vaguely threatening at her, but can't really articulate because, not a good vocabulary.
Got it. Yeah, so I mean, in that case, at the very least, she would probably, if assuming that she had her crown in her person, that would be excuse me, on her person. That would probably be her first move. Would be to talk to Margandris about what's going on. He would be very quick to say, "Let's take care of this."
Okay, so she was sleeping. She got a odd feeling. She knew something was up. The dagger is right there by her side. She grabbed that in her crown. She's teleported. She has her crown. I'm assuming she puts it on and talks to Morgandris. And
Yes.
so the sword and the armor appears.
Yes. So we would materialize.
And
She is tall, but I'm imagining that a Cyclops would be much taller.
so Cyclops is 12 feet tall.
Oh yeah, it's double her size.
So does she have trouble vanquishing this, or is it just another day in the park for her?
Oh, I think that it would be a challenge, but it would be a fun challenge for her.
A fun challenge. Hey, I'm fighting for my life. Yay.
She's oh no, this see, unfortunately this is I hesitate to say all in a day's work, but she's slain nastier things.
Okay. So then she goes to work on the Cyclops.
Yes.
Takes it down, I'm assuming.
I would imagine that she would be able, especially, I mean, even if she were not working with her full capacity, even if, for example, she had to work with a dagger instead of a sword, I feel like she would figure it out. She's very tough. No, and the armor offers her a fair amount of resiliency. Just to sort of give you a reminder, it's very like Warhammer adjacent, very like
Oh, yeah.
pointy and defensive and offensive at the same time.
Nice. Okay, so no potion use after all then.
I think we might be potion free.
Okay. So just so you know, the potion was a potion of healing.
Ah.
I always like it when I roll when they get the love potion because that's crazy. No matter who gets it. But yeah, that was it. So okay, see, we always want to know about your characters, but we don't want you to spoil the book. So
Oh, that's fun. I kind of like that as far as an approach. It's very funny because that would have gone very differently if I had chosen Marin. Although Marin's decision probably would have been to pick up the knife and run as far out of the cave as he could get because he is a coward.
okay, is he a magic user or just?
He is. And I'm going to asterisk that with like it's complicated.
Okay.
The magic system in my world is largely blood, ink, and chalk based. And so, I mean, it's not really like a system. Like, it's not like
Right.
it's not standardified into like, oh, you could do this as like an RPG. It's very much like we don't know exactly what this does, but previous times have indicated that if you were to scrawl this particular circle in your own blood, wet your hand with it, and then press your palm in the middle of it, you might transform or transport to another place or etc.
Okay.
That's
Now I have a two-part question.
sure.
One, what is it that you enjoy most about writing fiction? And then second, what is the hardest part about producing said book?
Oh man. So I mean, I love writing fiction because I like the escapism. I feel like that's pretty standard, but it's absolutely true for me. In terms of like what I like to write. I don't really like to write things that are set on Earth unless I have a very good reason to. In part because I want to know what things are like elsewhere. And by elsewhere, I mean not on the news, not in a place that I can read about anywhere but my own head. And that's it's complicated and it makes things like sometimes it makes things like marketing stuff a little complicated, but as far as that goes, that's just sort of where my imagination goes. And the hardest part of doing anything with that is just the raw sheer amount of time and willpower it takes to actually write a book. And I don't think that's really all that interesting either. That's just the facts of the thing. I like to write in a way that I would describe as compulsive. I do actually have OCD and ADHD, and one of my compulsive behaviors is writing. So there are situations where I can end up writing as many as 20,000 words in a day.
Oh, wow.
It's not good. It's not healthy. Don't do it. But I have had days, multiple days of my life where that has happened. So I feel like I at least have to mention that is I'm what is called a burst writer. I'm not I'm not one of those people who can sit down and write 1,000 words a day and have a book at the end. Like I pretty much have to like write, stew on it, write some more, stew on it some more, and
Yep.
kind of cycle through that. But when I get to a point where like I need to string the whole book together, that's usually where those binges happen. Actually, is like I have 40,000 words and I need to put all of those other 40,000 words uh, together with probably about 20,000 words worth of glue. And that's that's essentially what I have had to do. So,
So just when you said you like to go and find out about these other worlds,
yes.
we had Co Lansdale on here.
Oh, nice.
Read Far Re-
I beg your pardon?
you read Far Removed by Co.
I that one's on my Kindle. I recognize the name though. We've met on social media.
I read it. It's on a moon orbiting a gas giant. All the creatures are amphibious, but all
Oh,
reproduction
that's so cool.
in the ocean. Then they wash up on shore. They have no memory of their life in the ocean, and then they go about and cast it. It is. I'm like, how did you come up with this world? It's just mind blowing. Just like, wow. I mean, wonderful. It's not a lot of sword action or whatever, but it's
Not
just
everything has to be.
it's wonderful. So I highly
It's on
recommend.
my list, so I can't. The perils of being an editor is that I don't. I have a lot of time for reading, and then I also don't have a lot of time for reading.
Right. So I always, as an author who, I mean, I will tell people, it's like, oh, don't you hate it when people get there, and there wrong? And then I send my book to Roe, and he's like, you did use the wrong there again. And I'm like, I know the difference. I swear I do.
Honestly, I have to say that Microsoft Word has gotten very aggressive in replacing words. And I've had that happen to me several times where it stuck a wrong word in my thing that I did not put there. And it's very annoying.
So, so when you edit, because I'm always like horrified when Rose sends it back. There's like 80% is like easy, like you called this person a he, and now it's a she. Pick a pronoun.
Yeah.
Go, and I'm like, oh god, that's so dumb. I knew better. And does that bother you at all as an editor, or is that just
Oh, no. That's just part of the job. I mean, that's really just like I wouldn't be asking someone else for their opinion if I didn't want it. And sometimes someone's opinion is going to be like, um, the type of editing work that I do is more in the like, um, trying to figure out a good way to like a good shorthand for it would be more like, so you have this scenario here where this character is having this encounter, and then later in the story they're having the same encounter again. Like, what are we doing that's different in that next encounter so that we can show growth in the character, that kind of thing.
yeah? So I always, when I get my manuscript back from Roe, I'm always go. There's an argument to be made that I'm not even monolingual.
Oh, I think that's a very normal feeling though. Like writers, I feel like you have to be a certain type of sensitive person to be able to convey emotions and
Yeah.
to discuss meaningfully like things that happen to your characters in ways that your audience can react to them. And so as a result, like you're also a very emotional person just as a writer. Like I feel like a lot of us are. And so hearing any feedback on like how we did that wrong is something that we respond very poorly to. And I mean, like I know that I factually respond very poorly to certain types of feedback. Usually when it's offered in a way that is hostile or self-aggrandizing. But like in terms of what I what I like to do as an editor is to specifically pull on all the little threads that make a story good and like tie them together so that they're even better.
Yep.
And like that's one of the greatest joys for me is being able to pick out all those threads and have my authors go like, "Oh, I didn't even see that was there." Like that's one of the that's one of the purposes of having other eyes on your story.
Yep.
And it's very validating when something that I pull out like that turns out to be something that really significantly helps the story along. So,
So do you like editing yourself, or is editing the scourge that you must go through?
um, You mean like having my own work edited or like editing my own work?
or like yeah, editing, and when you get it back and you're like, okay, now I have to fix all these things. Does that make you like, yay, I'll just make my story better, or is it?
So one of the nice things that I have is that one of my dearest and closest friends is Valerie Valdez, who is a very talented editor and author in her own right. And so a lot of what we do as authors together is like we kind of will spitball text back and forth with each other while we're writing it. And that kind of helps because we can shape things a little bit
Yeah.
as we're putting a book together. And so like with that kind of thing, I, getting that sort of initial feedback makes fitting the rest of the story together a little bit easier at that sort of critical juncture where you're not sure if everything fits and like we made sure you're using all the right words for stuff, all of those kind of things. But yeah, so that part of the process is actually like quite joyful for me. And going back to like read something that I haven't read in a long time, I am a constant editor, and I know factually it's going to be a problem for the rest of my career because, again, it kind of falls into that OCD thing where like I will read something that I have written, even something that is written and in print, and I will still like I'll still like see things that I would like to do differently. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm learning to be more hands off with that kind of thing after it's actually like a set thing and moving on to something else because I can spend a lot of time prevaricating about something that I have already published if I allow myself to.
I had one author, I don't know, remember who, because goldfish. But they're like,
No worries.
it's like when you go back to your first book and you're like, you shouldn't get upset with that. You should just be like, look how much I've grown as an author that I stopped
Absolutely.
right
That's so
away.
smart. That's extremely smart.
And I'm like, that is wow. That's a way just to shortcut the whole
I
self.
mean, if this is the worst book I ever write, it's going to be a great day.
So
And yeah, I feel like that's largely the same feeling for me is like if I am working on if I'm working on something for a really long time, I have a tendency to kind of like spread it out too far. And
mhm.
so that was actually like one of the things that drew me to the Ink for It Press self-publishing derby was that idea of like I have to just do it. I don't have time to spend years world building this thing. I can't pull from anything I've already written. I have to just write this thing and I have to be satisfied with it. I have to be enough done that I can let go. And that
Right.
was really validating for me actually because I have several stories that are in various states of disrepair because I spent a long time trying to make them perfect before I tried to make them stories.
Yep.
And that is both an occupational hazard of an author in general, but an occupational hazard of an author with OCD and ADHD in particular. So it just sort of like it's very easy to get very head up in world building stuff, and ultimately it's very funny because I think that the story behind Song of the Scourge Lands is actually a prequel to several other things that I have been working on for many many years.
Okay.
um I have one story that I the broad category of that story is what I call black glass, and it takes place in an obsidian castle named Black Glass. Surprises abound. But the setting for that story is a world in which a veil of magic has fallen over the world, and that veil is rotting, and it is creating a horrible magic pollution
Okay.
that has caused a lot of problems and turmoil in that particular world. And so that series is one of those things that I have been working on since roughly 2017. Um, and the story and the characters for that are very well formed in my head in some ways, and I love them very much. But I have not been able to spend a whole lot of time with them because I'm trying to get this done.
Right.
And so I'm kind of hoping eventually to get back to them. And There is an interstitial story that goes in between those two worlds also, and that project is kind of keeps getting pushed further back, but I'm making my peace with it that this is just going to have to be the thing I'm working on for a while. But I
Yeah.
also have another side thing I'm doing that's unrelated to either of these, and I'm hopeful to make a little like oh geez, I have two side projects. I am not a committed writer. I have to dance around a little bit. In part because I have to get so focused to do a burst write about something. I have to have things I can alternate with because otherwise what happens is that I toss all the things in one basket and then it just tends to not be as good of a story. Whereas
Right.
if I can keep my thoughts about a a kingdom where there's a crown with a demon inside it and like if I keep all of the things that kind of relate to that in one basket and then my thoughts about what it would be like if magic were rotting and creating horrible pollution in the whole world that I'm trying to build in a separate basket. Like, um, and then I have let's see. So I have one thing that's just totally formless, but it has a vibes folder. Like I have a Pinterest board that has like stuff that's for this story, but like I don't have character names or anything yet. It's just like I have I have shapes of who needs to be plugged into the story, and as soon as I figure out who those people are, then that story will probably take off very quickly.
Yeah.
But until I have that, I just have that vibes basket where I'm like, oh, that's for that, and I know it goes to that, so I'm just going to throw it in that basket for now. Um,
Okay, so can you hold up your first book again?
I sure can.
That is.
Oh, where
There you go.
I don't know where the camera is on this one, so I'm just gonna like, yeah.
Bringer of the Scourge. And do you have book 2 with you?
I do not. So the Shepherd and Shadow is not in print yet, because I have to do all the production work because I am a one-man production company, and so I haven't.
And when will that be out?
I would say the paperback will probably be out in January. I was
Okay.
hoping for December, but it's my calendar keeps filling up with stuff that I wasn't prepared to work on. So
And you said
it's
you're working on book 3 now, correct?
yeah, I would say book three. So the interesting thing of writing the second book is that I had to write some of the third book at the same time,
Nice.
and so
Do you have a
there are
title?
significant. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Right. Does the third book have a title yet?
Oh, the third book will be Crown of the World Unbound, which is all three of the titles of the books that I have are pieces of the prophecy that defines Verulin's life, and Crown of the World Unbound is the third one, and yes, so that is coming. I made a placeholder cover for it, but I have not. I am going to be painting the cover for that one, so that
And when do we think that will be out?
I'm going to say late summer
Okay.
of next year. Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Em, we're going to have to call it there, but thank you for showing up and going down all these rabbit holes with us.
Oh, I absolutely love a rabbit hole. Thank you so much for having me.
And when you get ready to launch a book, keep us in mind. We love to have.
Absolutely.
So
This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
now I'm going to hit end stream, and we're going to get like 5 seconds where we wave awkwardly, waiting for, the show to end. So wave
It's all
awkwardly.
good.